Welcome to the Banterpod, the potent and pertinent podcast of Bandersnatch Books. We're a small press publisher of treasures found off the beaten path for lovers of all that is good, true, and beautiful. I'm Carrie Givens, and I ask you please forgive my frogginess. I was singing in the Austrian Alps earlier this week, and the wind appears to have stolen my voice. But today, I am joined by my friend, Théa Rosenburg. Théa is a writer, a visual artist, a contributor to I've Got a Bad Case of Poetry, and the co-author of Strong Allies, which released from our friends at Square Halo Books this spring. Théa, welcome to the Banterpod.
Thank you. It's so much fun to be here.
I'm so glad you're here. So as we get going, can you just sort of introduce yourself quickly beyond the accolades I just listed?
Well, I live in Bellingham, Washington, like way on the left side of the country, and I have 4 daughters that are between the ages of 10 and 18 now. So I'm parenting through that season of getting ready to like have adults and all that. So yeah. And I don't know what else to say. I feel like you covered it pretty well. Yeah.
You know, just a few things.
Yep.
But yes, one of the things that is funny to me is we've never seen each other in our own spaces. We always meet up.
Right.
In other places, mostly Pennsylvania.
Yep.
But you have been in the world of books for some time now. I think we met, quote unquote, first through Story Warren, which we've talked to various and sundry Story Warren folk on this podcast. But you write book reviews for Story Warren that you also publish on your own blog. And you've been in that world of books for a long time. What is it about writing and thinking about books and making books? Why do you love it?
Oh man, I feel like that's asking like, why is a cherry tree in blossom beautiful? Like, I love it because they're good. I don't know. I grew up reading a lot. Like, my dad had a whole wall of books in our living room, and I just always had a free pass to read whatever I wanted. So I wrote a few book reports on thoroughly unage appropriate books. But so it's just been very much a part of my growing up, my young adult years, and then raising kids. It's just been so much fun to get to enjoy books with them for the first time that I never read as a kid. And yeah.
Would you say you have more fun meeting a book with your girls or introducing them to one you love?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I love sharing books with them that I already love, but there's always that chance that they won't love it as much as I did, or that they didn't meet it at just the right time. But we just recently, I read the Emma M. Lyon books. I don't know if you... Yes. And so I would read one and then pass it to my oldest daughter, and then she'd pass it to my next oldest daughter. It was so much fun to be like reading that series along with each other. And they all had to wait for me because I'm the slowest reader in the chain, right?
Of course. Teenagers
and it was
read
killing them. They were like, Mom, don't you have, like, surely that's all you have to do right now, right? So it was a lot of fun to get to discover that with them sort of in real time as we were all trying to guess what was going to happen next. And,
exactly.
So I might lean slightly that way, but I'm a big fan of both.
I like that. When I was introduced to those books, I knew they would suck me in. So I waited over a year before actually starting to read them because I was like, I have to do it when I have time. And it was when the audio came out that I was like, okay, I'll be able to get through these, you know. But it was literally, we had snowstorms this winter in Charlotte, which is not particularly normal. And it was over the course of the 2 weeks of bad weather and being stuck at home. And I burned through 8 books.
Perfect.
So fast.
I was actually sick for the first couple of books. So I was on the couch just reading all day.
See?
So
yeah.
I had to warn them. I was like, it's really going to slow down once I get better. Like,
exactly. When I can do other things and have to go to work, you know, or whatever.
Yeah.
It's a shame. Okay, so you have started doing lino-cut art in the last few years, I think.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that journey and tell me how that plays into your creativity as a words person, now also being a visual artist.
Well, I've always done art in some form since I was a kid. So those things were very much in tandem for me growing up because I was always reading and I was always drawing. And so when I had kind of a funny situation my first quarter in college where I had to pick a major like immediately. Like I just got there and they were like, you have too many credits coming in with a transfer degree. Like you have to declare a major right now. I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm 18 and I have no idea. And so my husband and I, we weren't married at the time, but we were looking at this list of majors together and had it narrowed down to creative writing or art. And he said this wise thing that has always stuck with me, where he said, like, you know, these are both really important things that you do, but the writing that's like how you see the world and how you communicate that. And then the art comes out of that. So I don't know exactly what that means, but I feel like I've been mulling it over ever since. So writing has been a constant throughout my adult life. I ended up majoring in creative writing, and then art feels like something that the Lord will give back to me for a while, and then I'll need to lay it down for a bit and give it back, and then I'll need to lay it down. And so when my girls were little, it looked a lot like drawing coloring pages for them and, you know, just things like that. Right. And then it's been really fun these last couple of years to kind of get to dig into it more. And obviously Ned Bustard is a huge influence in that. Like I've accumulated more and more of his art. And so I was kind of laughing. I was like, apparently you can't like surround yourself with it without ultimately wanting to try it. You know,
this is true. This is true. So. I haven't yet, but you know, I do have. You can see it over my head on the video. Yep. That's one that it's a Ned piece that I did the pull, you know, the inking and the pulling of the print. And he was like, okay, well, you pulled the print. You have to sign it. And I was like, yes, Ned, but you made the art, so you also have to sign it. So that one is co-signed. There you go. By Ned and me together.
A collaborative piece. That's very for a halo of you.
Exactly. So before we get to Strong Allies, I want to share one of your poems from I've Got a Bad Case of Poetry, because you and I both wound up on the Pie page together. And
this is a good thing to bond over.
This is an excellent thing to bond over. And so I'm just going to read A Time for Everything. A time for pie, a time for breakfast, a time for breakfast pie. This might be my favorite poem in the entire book, Thea.
I love that so much. I feel like that appeals to a very small group of people, and I'm so grateful that you're one of them.
It's like literally when I make pie, I think about how I'm going to eat it for breakfast.
Right? We firmly believe in breakfast pie in our household.
So, yes. So you've got several poems in our flora and fauna section, and then you've got the pie one. I think there's another one in another section. So thank you for being part of that adventure with us.
Thank you for letting me.
Oh my goodness, yes. What was your highlight in that entire journey? Was it like your writing of poems? Was it something else in the process?
With the I've Got a Bad Case of Poetry?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I love that poem made it in there. That was one that I just wrote on we have a whiteboard on our fridge that is just fair game for everybody to write random things on. So right now there's a rousing discussion going on that whiteboard about, is the ocean a soup? Which, think about it for a minute, you know. So anyway, so with 4 daughters, that whiteboard sees a lot of traffic. But that was one day I just kind of like threw that one up there and it stuck. And so I was really grateful that it ended up there. But it was fun I loved writing the poems. I also got to help get Leslie Bustard's poems ready to submit there too. So it was fun to be kind of working on ours in tandem and finding poems of hers that hadn't found a home yet, or that I actually haven't even read. Ned sent a bunch to me that I hadn't read yet. So yeah, so it was all good. It was a fun process.
Yeah. Well, and I think I heard you submitted some poems and Ned was like, hey, one of those is mine.
That's possible.
And so there was
a lot of emails.
We now have Ned and Leslie poems, or Leslie and Ned poems in there, because we didn't know exactly who wrote what. It's a good thing Ned's here to keep us straight.
I know. I think I sent you a lot of poems between like the 3 of us, maybe.
I bet. All right, so I do want to talk about the book Strong Allies, and you are credited on it as a co-author with Leslie Bustard. So I want to give our listeners just a little bit of background about Ned and Leslie. If you have listened back on the podcast, on the Vanderpod, Ned was a guest in season 3. I believe it was episode 2. So you can go listen to that. Ned and I laughed ridiculously on that recording, so that's how Ned and I interact all the time. It's a great example. So I think I first met them in like 2012 or 13, Ned and Leslie, but it was just like a one-off event. And so I reconnected with them through the Rabbit Room in probably 2017, 2018. First it was with Ned and then later with Leslie. And they lived in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and my parents have landed there in retirement, and so I visit there pretty regularly. So I have often dropped in at their house, and Leslie and I had more than one conversation around a charcuterie board on their kitchen table, and specifically about this concept of the strong ally or the necessary ally. And one of the reasons why we talked about it so often was, as someone who's not married and doesn't have kids, she was like, "Ooh, I want your take on this. Like, how does this feel to you?"
Yeah.
Because she really wanted to develop this idea for all women, not just for mothers or wives. And so that was just such a rich ongoing conversation that we talked about, submitting presentation pitches to conferences and things like that. So Leslie was working on how to put these ideas together and present these ideas together she was working on the ideas for her entire adult life, but really trying to bring them together before she was diagnosed with cancer in 2019. She kept working on it among the many projects she worked on in the next couple of years. But Jesus took her home in the spring of 2023. And you, Théa, stepped in at that point to start help shaping Leslie's writings. And you've kind of worked with a lot of, Tiny Thoughts I've Been Thinking is a book of her writings.
Yeah.
The book of her poetry was The Goodness of the Lord in the Land of the Living. And then this is kind of Leslie's magnum opus. But Théa, you are co-author. So help me understand and help our listeners understand the creation process of this book, and what does co-authoring look like in this case?
Yeah, well, it's different, obviously, than you would normally think when you think co-authoring. So I met Leslie just the summer before she was diagnosed with cancer in 2019. And from the beginning, she was talking about working on this book. So we had talked about me helping her, because I'm an editor. I edit for Square Halo Books and have done that since then. That was the year that I started for them as well. So we talked about me helping as an editor for this project originally. And then obviously when she was diagnosed, then that was something that kind of moved to the back burner in terms of projects. And she started writing all those beautiful essays and poems and things that eventually landed in Tiny Thoughts That I've Been Thinking. But toward her last months in 2023, then that was when she kind of came back to this idea, wanting to finish up this book. For a while, I was getting to work on it with her a little bit, trying to pull things together so that hopefully she could just do the revision and kind of fine tuning. But, she didn't get to finish that. So co-authoring on this end of things has looked like she left a lot. Like you said, she had spoken about, thought about, taught about these ideas for such a long time. So she left a lot of notes, or really detailed notes, from a class she taught at her Sunday school at church. I had recordings from that class, different podcast interviews she'd done, articles, research notes, like so many materials. And so my co-authoring role, I guess, was to kind of help weave those things together, like trying to preserve her voice as much as possible, use her original words wherever I could, where I needed to fill in gaps and maybe write something myself. Ned and I decided for me to do that in her voice so that it would feel really seamlessly her. So yeah, that's kind of what it looked like. It was, I don't know, like quilting, I guess.
Yeah. I love that image. Yeah. So I just realized we haven't told the listeners, if they haven't been reading the book or listening to Leslie for the last, however many years, what is the strong ally? So maybe give that quick.
Yeah.
What is the concept of the book?
Yes. The flyover view is Leslie was looking at the word azer, which is a Hebrew word that's often translated as helpmeet in Genesis when God is speaking about Eve and talking about how he's going to make an azer like Adam to help him, right? And so she was really digging into, was that word helper, was it sufficient for what this word actually, how it's used in the rest of Scripture? So everywhere else that it's used, when it's not referring specifically to Eve in those early chapters of Genesis, it's talking about the saving help of the Lord, in not every time, but most of the time. And so that's a very different picture than we get if you think about a helper as like an assistant or someone who's sort of doing like secondary. It's like, no, this is like a strong saving kind of help that Eve is offering to Adam. And so So Leslie was working out this idea of what does it mean for women to be created in the image of God as this helper and the kind of helper that he was for his people and that he is for his people. So that's where the term strong ally comes in. That was her trying to find a more precise way, I think, to communicate that idea.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love on the back of the book, it says countless books have been written about what women can and can't do. But this book asks the questions, what did God make women to be? And I think, as I've been going through it, just that picture is so nuanced and so broad and so diverse. And, it goes back to, if we're reflecting the image of God, like how many times does God give us a different name to name himself? Something that means something different. And all of those names are names of God.
Yeah.
And I always think like reflecting the image of God does not mean one thing, because God is multifaceted. He is many, many named.
Yeah.
So let's talk a minute about the structure of Strong Allies, because in addition to Leslie's writings and your quilting of Leslie's writings, there are also these vignette essays all the way through, and they're kind of weaving together the chapters. So what is that structure in the book? How do you think about it? And then what does that look like from an editorial sense as you're bringing the book together?
The main portion of the book is Leslie's teachings, right? So it goes through her fleshing out what this word azera means, and then looking through, they're just different chapters working all the way through scripture, looking at different examples of women and how they lived out this design or didn't live it out, all the way up to how can we do that today. So each chapter, the first portion is that. It's Leslie writing about these ideas. But then at the end of each chapter are 3 or 4 short essays, and they're written. You have one in there, and
I do.
And so, and it was really important to Leslie to include a lot of voices in there. I mean, she was really committed to this, to making clear that this idea is not just for wives and mothers, but that this is something women can live out at every age and every season. Like it's who we are. So it's not contingent on our circumstances. And I think she realized that she's not going to be able to speak to every circumstance firsthand. It was really important to Leslie that she make this more of a dialogue and a conversation. So she actually sent out the email requesting those essays from a lot of different women as she was getting ready to go into the hospital for what would be her last surgery.
Yeah.
So the way that Ned described it was he wanted it to feel like Leslie having a bunch of women over and having a conversation about this. And so there are women in there coming from all different seasons of life, from different circumstances, even different beliefs about women. Like there's a wide range of people writing for it. And and then from the editorial side, that was the big question,
right?
was how to fit this together in a way that wouldn't confuse readers, that didn't feel like it was just pivoting every 3 pages to some completely new thing.
Right.
And so we definitely had a moment where we had it structured one way, and this was Ned as the book designer and I going back and forth and realizing, we're going to have to totally restructure the whole thing. So that was where we landed at putting them at the end of the chapter. So it was really clear, this is Leslie. And then now there's going to be this more conversational piece with these other writers sharing different perspectives.
I love that, like thinking about it as a conversation and having, Leslie talks about the charcuterie board, like sitting around that table and having that conversation and just getting to share. And, and for me, it was, with Leslie and her girls, just sitting around and listening and having those conversations and talking and getting to hear different perspectives. And, for them, they were, young adults at that point and just kind of starting out on their own for the girls. And so anyway, I really think the structure works and brings that conversational piece. One of the questions that I got about this book when I first posted about it was, well, which camp does this fall in? And I was like, not. And it was one of those where I was like, I was able to say, that's not the point. Like the point of this book is not what camp is right on the perspective of the role of women or whatever.
Yeah.
It is, how did God create women? Let's look at scripture, look at lived experiences and say, what are the ways that women serve their communities and their people and all of those things? And it just was, of course, that's the first question that you get.
And the why is there another book about women?
Right.
What's different about this one?
Yeah. And the thing is, I do think this is different. I haven't seen another book out there that is wrestling with ideas in the same way this book is. And that's really exciting. And even like I've noticed in the footnotes that Leslie, she's using tons of different resources that I'm sure you had to look up all of the footnotes for. So good job, editor.
Oh, I read all of them. Yeah.
Good
I was
job.
like, I better know what we're talking about. Yeah. Well, and I think that was like, obviously, like Leslie had her convictions and I have my convictions, but I think that this book is meant to be kind of upstream from all those conversations, like all the ones that get really divisive. And so the idea being like, before we get into who can be ordained and who can't, or those different questions, like, let's just talk about what is God's vision for women? What are we doing in our daily lives? Most of us, that's not even a relevant question. Like most of us are doing completely other things, And so it's a tough line to walk. Like it's tough to hold that tension and say, but no, I think there's chairs at the table for this in this conversation for people who hold really different views on these really, controversial things.
Right.
And yet, and like important things. Like it's not like these questions don't matter, but to say like we can still meet and talk about the things we do have in common and maybe later get into the places where we might disagree or something,
Right. Yeah. I love that. You have a vignette essay in the book about Mariah Fearing. And I found that so fascinating. I had never heard about her before. So can you tell our listeners just a little bit about her?
Oh, I would love to. She is so amazing. So Leslie and I also worked on a book, Wild Things and Castles in the Sky, and you're in that one. And Leslie's daughter, Carrie, helped with that too. And one of the things that was really important to Leslie and Carrie in that book was to reflect a lot of different perspectives and to show, not just the same books and stories that we're all familiar with already, but like who are people that haven't really gotten to tell their story and how can we find ways to bring them into the conversation? So I actually found out about Mariah Fearing in a book that I read for that project that was carved in ebony by Jasmine Holmes. And it was one of the only places I found anything about this woman. Like she's just not out there much. So I was really grateful that she had written about her in that book. But Mariah Fearing was born into slavery in the American South, and she was freed, I believe, at the end of the Civil War with the Emancipation Proclamation. And then she went to school. She didn't go back to school. She went to school for the first time as a grown woman to learn to read. And she sat in a classroom alongside kids and learned how to read. She saved money to buy her own home. And these were things that like single women weren't doing, let alone single Black women in the South at that time.
Right.
And then she eventually felt called to go serve in the Congo overseas, but no missions board would take her because at that point they considered her too old. So she sold her home and funded her own trip into the Congo, which the Congo at that time period was horrific. It was during the reign of King Leopold II, and it's the number of people that were killed under his reign in the Congo was almost as many as in the whole Holocaust.
Wow.
Just in this one country. It was like half the population of the Congo. So she was going into a place where the children were incredibly vulnerable. People were being just treated brutally under this dictator. And she established a home, like a home for girls. And she was such she was such a strong ally to them. Like she gave them a place of safety, and she helped educate them and taught them skills that they could take with them, and went on. Eventually she had to come back to the States for her health reasons. But at one point I read that she had always kept enough money saved up to go back if she could ever go back. And this is like a woman who's like in her 80s at that point. And so just an incredible story of someone who lived through something really difficult. It would have been understandable if she wanted to just stay and enjoy finally having the rights that she had gained and the money that she had saved. And yet she gave all that up to go and redeem these kids out of slavery. It's just a really incredible story. So yeah, I'm glad that you enjoyed reading about her. I hope that more things come out about her. I was so grateful that Jasmine Holmes had taken the time to share her story because it's a good one.
I love that. I love that. So in my vignette, I wrote about Dorothea Brooke from George Eliot's novel Middlemarch, and the epitaph that Eliot gives her at the end of the book. Dorothea, basically, Middlemarch, I mean, it has a ton of characters. It's about a town in the Midlands, in England. And you get all of these different characters and you follow all of their stories over many years. And you kind of have three women that are the focal characters. And one of them, Mary Garth, I would say, is a strong ally and is in some ways pretty uncomplicated, like as a strong ally. Like she is solid pretty much the whole way through. She rises up or pulls up all of the people around her. And she's my first read through Dorothea was my obsession. My second read through Mary Garth was my obsession. But I also, was struck by Dorothea. And then I think you have an anti-Azer in the third character whose name has just completely slipped my mind. But you have a woman that is not a strong ally to the people around her. But in Dorothea, you have this fascinating mix because she starts off with the highest ideals. I mean, she is so idealistic, and her story and the story she lives is really one of breaking down those ideals. She does not accomplish most of what she set out to accomplish. But Eliot gives her this epitaph at the end of the novel, and I'm just going to read it because it is the best last couple of sentences of a novel out there. And it says, "But the effect of her being on those around her was incalculably diffusive, for the growing good of the world is partly dependent on unhistoric acts, and that things are not so ill with you and me as they might have been is half owing to the number who lived faithfully a hidden life and rest in unvisited tombs." So as we talk about our friend Leslie, that quote is so fitting. I think, if I'm remembering correctly, the week that she died, that's actually what I posted on Facebook.
Yeah.
Was that quote, because this idea that a faithful hidden life is as important, as influential as, the person who stands up in front of the crowd and speaks, the sermons or whatever. So as you thought about that essay and where it was going to land in the book, or that character, I mean, my essay is just talking about that character. But as you thought about that character and where it would land in the book, because she's a complex character, what sort of decisions were you making, and why did she fall where she fell?
Well, I love that you wrote about Dorothea because I love Middlemarch also, and that passage is heavily underlined in my own copy. It's so good. But also that specific quote Leslie wrote about a couple of times. And so it was very fitting to have it in there. But it also presented me with this editorial challenge of Leslie also used it in the book. And often when I'm working on a project where there's multiple authors, I have to decide, well, like, okay, we can't all use that same C.S. Lewis quote. So somebody gets to use it. But in this case, it was so perfect for both who Leslie was, the way I also feel about her, and the message of the book, that I ended up putting yours toward the beginning, which was perfect because it's in the creating section. Like, and it's such a beautiful picture of the beauty that we get to create with our lives, and how we don't know how the Lord's going to use that and what he's going to do in the lives of others through that. And then at the very end of the book, Leslie also used it in her notes. And then I refer to it a third time in the acknowledgments. So it's actually this through line through the whole book. And my hope was that they're far enough away from each other that it doesn't feel repetitive, but that it feels like this sort of harmonizing, because it appears at a slightly different place in the, in the thought line of the book, right? Each time. And so my hope is that each time you feel a little bit more of the depth, or you hear a little something different in it, because it is such a perfect picture of like what Leslie was writing about in this book, is just living our lives for the glory of God and trying to be strong allies wherever he puts us, and trusting him with whatever the outcome is of that.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. The first time I read Middlemarch, I was in grad school. I had to do a presentation on it the next week. So I read it in 4 days.
That is too fast.
This book is about 800 pages long, everyone.
It's so huge.
And it's so like one of those, you know, they make mini series of these British novels, not movies, because there's no way you can fit all of this story into one. But it stuck so much with me. And I just kept ruminating on it over the next 15 years probably. And then I was like, I should go back again and read it again, slower this time. So I did an audiobook the second time. And, you know, so I spent 18 hours on it instead. But again, like, still loved Dorothea. You know, I mean, that was my big takeaway the first time, and still loved her character and her arc the second time through, but got to see, you know, and really got to revel in the other characters as well. Because when you read 800 pages in 4 days, you really don't pay attention to a lot of details.
Yeah, you might miss some subplots along the way.
Some subplots.
Well, I love it. My first time I read Middlemarch, I stopped partway through, and I never leave books unfinished. Like, it's almost like I can't do it. And I got bogged down in one scene, and I decided to stop. And then later I thought, okay, I should give it another try. And then it turned out to be this amazing book. So it just underscored, like, anytime I think about not finishing a book, I'm like, but what if it's Middlemarch? Like, I almost didn't finish Middlemarch.
All right. Well, we are going to wrap ourselves up here with some fun popcorn questions. We like to throw these at you, just, you know, toss some popcorn your way.
So I can lie awake tonight and think about what I should have said.
Exactly. There are no wrong answers. So I'm going to ask these real fast.
All right.
First one. Have you ever gone on a literary pilgrimage? And if you have, where? If not, where would you go?
Oh my gosh, you asked the right person this question.
Yay!
Yes. So for my daughter's 13th birthday, I take each of them somewhere that they want to go. Since we're a big family, logistically, it's hard to get everybody. So anyway, to shorten that story to a popcorn size. So we get to like plan a week and go somewhere. And my oldest daughter wanted to go to Louisa May Alcott's house. And we got to go visit that, which was amazing. And my second daughter wanted to go to Maud Hart Lovelace's house, which is preserved as a Betsy Tacy museum. We love the Betsy Tacy books. So both of those trips were just amazing. Highly recommend both. They're just these wonderful little home museums that both books are set in the houses themselves. And so it's like walking into Little Women or walking into Betsy's house. It's great.
Oh, I love that. Okay. What is your favorite childhood book?
Oh, man. I think it would be a tie between A Wrinkle in Time and The Best Christmas Pageant Ever.
Nice. I mean, there's some differences between those books. But...
Yeah, oh yeah, very different. But I think as a kid, you know, I read really broadly. I read a lot of different things. And looking back, I think that those two, I didn't grow up going to church. So I think they were some of the first places I really heard the gospel, I heard any aspect of it. So I have a soft spot for both of them.
I get that.
Yeah.
Okay. So what is your standard bookmark when you're reading?
Ooh, I have lately gotten into book darts.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if it's just that I'm getting older and it takes me longer to find my place again, but I feel like those are lovely. Also, we have a lot of cats who like to chew on any kind of tassel or anything like that.
Yeah.
So, but I'm not opposed to dog earring either. I know that's controversial.
Okay.
Yeah.
I hear that. What do you think is the oddest thing you've ever used as a bookmark?
Oh, man. I believe I threw a guitar tuner in a book one time to save a page, which is not small. It was not convenient, but
no. Oh, one time one of my friends was flipping through a book of mine and she goes, there's a check in here. And I was like, oh, and she pulls it out. She goes, oh, it says electronically deposited. So it was one that
good.
I had done a mobile deposit and then used it as a bookmark. So, you know.
I love that. I love buying used books and finding things people have left in them.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
That's
fun.
one of like life's little pleasures.
It is. Théa, thank you so much for joining us on the Vanderpod today.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's been
was
so fun.
Great. Listeners, may you find bookish treasures in your wanderings off the beaten path. Thanks for listening in to our conversation today on the Vanderpod. We hope you'll check out our full catalog at bandersnatchbooks.com. The Vanderpod is produced by Rachel S. Donahue, A.B. Donahue, and Carolyn Claire Gibbons. Audio engineering by S.D.G. Morgan. Artwork by Evelyn Warnamendi. Many thanks to our friend Chris Slayton of Son of Laughter for our theme song, Cricket in a Jar. Find links and more in the show notes.